This year, to finish off the spooky season, I'll be exploring one of the most terrifying things in human existence: conservative propaganda. And also plastic pollution. I'll leave it up to you to decide which one is more terrifying. That's right, I'm once again discussing Leo and Layla's History Adventures, a seemingly innocent kids cartoon that is actively trying to indoctrinate your children. Created by PragerU, a non-profit organization dedicated to creating conservative media, Leo and Layla follows the adventures of a pair of siblings who, in an attempt to better understand current events, travel back in time to talk with various historical figures. Though, as I demonstrated with my last video, this series is not always historically accurate, occasionally altering or misrepresenting elements of history to promote a conservative message. Though ever the optimist, I decided to take another look at the series to see if PragerU could actually make a factually correct episode. The episode begins with a rather distraught-looking Leo who is unhappy about his teacher's campaign to ban plastic from school. While Layla explains that plastic pollution is a problem and that using less plastic would probably be a good thing, Leo is unconvinced, remarking that,
"But if it's so bad for the environment, why is it in almost everything? And why was it invented in the first place?"
This prompts the pair to travel back to 1934, where they are introduced to Leo Bakeland, Belgian chemist and inventor of Bakelite, the world's first fully synthetic plastic. Now, while I do have my doubts about their depiction of Bakeland's personality, as I have a hard time believing that anyone could love chemistry puns that much,
well, light me up and call me a Bunsen burner.
The episode actually provides a fairly accurate summary of the early history of plastic, referencing the important impact that it had on society by providing a cheap alternative to natural materials like bone, horns, and ivory, which were becoming scarce due to overhunting. To my surprise, the episode also briefly mentions the impact of plastic pollution, admitting that we need to find better ways to recycle and deal with plastic waste, though the episode ultimately still has a pro-plastic message, as Leo is so inspired by his conversation with Bakeland, which conveniently glosses over many of the key facts about plastic pollution, that he decides to make a list of the various uses of plastic, which he hopes will convince his teacher to abandon her anti-plastic campaign. Leo, buddy, you know that plastic pollution is still a problem, right? While it is true that the invention of plastic has yielded a number of positive advancements for humanity, society's over-reliance on single-use plastic has been severely detrimental to both human health and the environment. What's worse is that the systems we developed to deal with plastic waste, primarily recycling, are actually pretty ineffective. While alternative methods of waste management are either too expensive or too underdeveloped to make any real impact. But despite this, the plastic industry and our dependence on single-use plastic continues to grow, to the point where plastic is now almost everywhere on Earth. In the water, soil, air, food, the fossil record, even in our own bodies. Sorry, let's slow down and examine these issues one at a time. Though recycling programs have been in operation in North America since the 1980s, their impact when it comes to managing plastic waste is incredibly minimal, as only about 10% of plastic products have been recycled, with most ending up in landfills, burning piles, or the environment. While this may seem surprising, being that most plastic products are recyclable, under the current system, recycled plastic is both difficult to make and hard to sell. Mechanical recycling, the most common recycling method, melts down plastic waste into pellets that can be used to make new products. But being that different types of plastic tend not to mix well together, this means that before plastic can be recycled, it has to be properly sorted, which is actually fairly difficult, being that most products contain varying amounts of different chemicals and additives. Also, being that plastics are polymers, large molecules composed of smaller chemicals bonded together, melting them down damages the molecular bonds holding the material together, resulting in a product with far less structural integrity. This means that not only is recycled plastic less durable and thus more difficult to market, but it can only be recycled so many times before it becomes unusable. Unfortunately, while this problem could be improved by simply redesigning plastic products to better conform to the recycling process, this would require a considerable amount of time and investment that many manufacturers are unwilling or unable to make. On the other hand, alternative recycling strategies also require a considerable amount of time and investment, as many are still in their infancy, while others simply lack the infrastructure and resources needed to be effective. For example, one of the alternatives to mechanical recycling, chemical recycling, which uses extreme heat and pressure to break down plastic polymers into basic components that are then used to make new products, could theoretically allow for the infinite recycling of plastic. But this is an incredibly expensive and energy-intensive process, which, as it stands now, is primarily used for making fuel. Unfortunately, our inability to recycle plastic has become a serious problem, as plastic pollution and its effects on the environment are starting to get out of hand. With nearly 400 million tons of plastic waste being produced each year, much of which eventually finds its way back into the environment. While most people are probably aware of the effects of plastic pollution on the ecosystem, specifically its ability to poison and ensnare wildlife, recent research has discovered that the effects of plastic waste could be far worse than we initially realized. While it's estimated that between 75 to 199 million tons of plastic currently resides in the world's oceans, the bulk of this, around 92%, can be classified as microplastics, small particles less than 5 millimeters in diameter that are created when plastic waste decomposes or is torn apart by the environment. Given their small size, these particles can easily migrate through the water system, where they eventually infect our water, soil, and food supply. Though the effects of microplastics on human health and the environment is still an emerging area of study, scientists have understandably raised concerns about the possible negative effects of microplastics. While it's been proposed that microplastics could damage our bodies on a physical level, which doesn't sound all that far-fetched given that small quantities of microplastics have been found in most of our internal organs, what's most concerning is the fact that many of the chemicals used to make plastic are actually toxic. These include chemicals like bisphenol A, an endocrine disruptor associated with obesity and heart disease, phthalates, esters of phthalic acid, which are suspected of being carcinogenic, and heavy metals like magnesium and lead. Microplastics in the ocean are also breeding grounds for microorganisms, which, if ingested by sea life, could alter the composition of the bacterial community in their intestines, leading to illness. The ingestion of microplastics by sea life could also lead to malnutrition, as it's been theorized that the accumulation of plastic in their stomachs forces them to feel full while providing no actual nutrition. But, as concerning as this is, the negative effects of microplastics are still being assessed, and it's possible that they may not pose a serious threat to the health of living creatures. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the pollution created during the manufacturing process. While Layla correctly points out that most plastics are made from fossil fuels, primarily oil and natural gas, she fails to mention that the plastic industry is a primary source of greenhouse gas emissions.
You mean to tell me people are upset about using dead plants and animals? Fossil fuels are cheap and plentiful, thank goodness. So we don't need to use living animals, and we can create items to improve the lives of everyone.
Greenhouse gases, as I'm sure most of you already know, are gases in our outer atmosphere that absorb and redistribute heat reflected by the Earth's surface, causing an increase in our planet's overall temperature, along with a slew of negative side effects, like droughts and severe weather phenomenon. While exact emission numbers are hard to come by, according to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, plastic production in the United States contributes an average of 114 million tons of greenhouse gases per year. And considering that the petrochemical industry in the United States is expected to grow exponentially over the next 25 years, plastic and its effects on global warming is starting to become a serious concern. But even putting the issue of global warming aside, something that the creators of Leo and Layla were clearly very eager to do, the plastic industry is also a serious source of air pollution. The best, or I guess worst example of this can be found in Louisiana's Cancer Alley, an 85-mile stretch of land along the Mississippi River that houses over 150 oil refineries, chemical facilities, and plastic plants. As the name would suggest, the accumulation of air and water pollution in this area is believed to be linked to increased occurrences of cancer diagnosis among residents, as the risk of contracting cancer in highly polluted areas is 4% higher than the state average. And considering that Louisiana already has the second highest rate of cancer diagnosis in the country, that is honestly kind of terrifying. While this episode begins by asking several pertinent questions about plastic pollution and its effects on our planet, it quickly shifts from questioning our dependence on plastic to praising it, turning what was supposed to be an educational program into a commercial for the petrochemical industry. Which, considering that promoting big oil and touting conservative rhetoric is apparently how PragerU makes most of its money, isn't all that surprising. The truth is that though many people are working to solve the plastic problem by creating better ways to recycle and deal with plastic waste, it is likely going to be a while before we start to see any genuine improvement in this area. And until that time comes, it's up to us to stem the tide of plastic pollution any way we can, because no one can live in a plastic world. Unfortunately, this realization has not made the prospect of grading this episode any easier. Should I grade it purely on the basis of historical accuracy, or should I deduct marks for leaving out so many important facts about plastic pollution? Especially considering that it was kinda the main subject of the episode. You know what? I think I'm just gonna pass the burden on to you. How would you grade this absolute mess of an episode? Give me your answer in the comment section down below, and I will see you all next time. Well, if my next review doesn't kill me first.